Hello everyone, I've decided to make a UI tutorial for buffs and debuffs. In WoW you have weak auras, in Final Fantasy XIV we have the HUD layout. Xenos is the inspiration for the making of this tutorial on UI settings. Allow me to play the clip that inspired me to make this video.
Actually, I do. It's okay. I don't think it's bad, but there's like a lot of little stuff that I wish you could do. Like there's a lot of little stuff.
Perfectly covering the other
like I'll give you an example, right? Like, so if you look on my buff bar, okay? Like all of my buffs, so like my Storm's Eye, my Inner Release, I want to make those buffs bigger than the other buffs. Like basically I want to be able to very easily tell my buffs apart from other people's buffs, and you can't and you can't do that without increasing the size of like all the buffs. Like I only want certain buffs. I wish you could pick and choose. Also the text, it's like this like pale green, and sometimes it's hard to see.
So he has stated in one of his latest videos that he would like to A, have bigger personal buffs on his buff bar, B, separate his personal buffs from the buffs he receives from party members, and C, change the text color of the cooldown on his personal buffs. The HUD layout actually hides many settings, so you may not even know that they are there. As such, I will only be covering the status effect UI elements in this video. The first thing I would like to tackle is the text color on personal buffs. There is nothing to be done about that. I'm sorry, but pastel green is just what we get. With the fail out of the way, let's tackle the rest. Let's start by locating the buffs and debuffs UI settings. These settings are located in the HUD layout. To get to the HUD layout, press Escape and select HUD layout, or go to System and select HUD layout. Once in the HUD layout, locate your buffs and/or debuffs. They will be labeled status effects or status info. Click on one of them. If you're using controller, use this drop-down menu to locate your buffs and debuffs bars. Then locate the settings sprocket labeled UI Element Settings. Click that to open the settings window. In this window, there are a lot of settings, so let's go over each one real quick. From top to bottom, we have the element size. This is where you can change the size of the element. The transparency setting. The higher the number, the less likely you are to see the element. And display element. This just means we're displaying the element in our UI. Next, we have the layout. By default, it is set to split element into 3 groups. But you can display it as a single element. This makes your buffs all one singular bar. That's not what we want to do, so we're going to leave it on split element into 3 groups. And you also have split element into 4 groups, and we'll cover that later. You have group 1, status info enhancements, that's your buffs. You have the element size, this is where you change the size of your buffs. The transparency, as you see when you slide this all the way up to 90, your buffs can no longer be seen, so you want to keep that at 0. Then you have display element, and again, having this checked just means that you are displaying the element in your UI. The display settings of group 1 are default, prioritize own enhancements, we'll go over that one, display others enhancements in group 4, we'll also cover that, and focus using the gamepad. This checkbox doesn't affect your gameplay whatsoever, so just go ahead and leave it as is. Then you have layout. This is just how you want your buffs to be seen. By default, I believe it is set to left justified 10 by 2. What this means is there are 2 rows of 10 buffs. I have it changed to 1 row of 20 buffs. You can also have it right justified, but I kept it left justified. Now we have group 2, you have the element size, this is where you change the size, the transparency we've already covered, display element, focus using gamepad, and the layout, which is the left and right justified. Group 3 is the same, element size, transparency, display element, focus using the gamepad, and the layout, left and right justified. Group 4, status info other, again element size and transparency, display element, and for some reason status info others group 4 is not selected for focusing using gamepad. It doesn't change your gameplay, so it's fine. Then you have the layout, left justified and right justified. Now that we've covered all of the settings, let's go ahead and change the size of our buffs. As one of the things that was stated in the clip that inspired this video, we want to make them bigger. So we'll go to the status info enhancements. This is our buffs, right, that we get right here. And we will go ahead and change it to 140 just for the sake of the video. I'm going to go ahead and save those settings. and we will see what that looks like. I'm going to tell my friend here to go ahead and give me some buffs. As you can see, the buffs are now bigger. They're more easily seen, which is great. Now we have more buffs. One of the problems, though, is that our buffs, our personal buffs, are mixed in with the party buffs. So you can see we have Divine Benison over here, Regen right there, and then we have my Rampart, we have my Bloodwetting and things like that, and they're all just kind of mixed in. So the next thing we need to do is separate the buffs. So we're going to go back into the HUD layout, and we're going to go back to the buffs bar. And now we need to separate them. There's a couple ways that we can separate them. So the first way, under Group 1, this is the only group you can do this in, by the way. It's the only group that it matters for. In Group 1, which is your enhancements, you can go to the display settings and change them from default, which is what you just saw, to prioritize own enhancements. Now, by prioritizing your own enhancements, it prioritizes them based on your layout. We have the layout set to left justified 20 by 1. So our personal buffs will be prioritized to the left. So as we go ahead, we'll have more buffs on us. So as you see, we have the buffs from my white mage friend here, but as I use my own buffs, they are prioritized to the front. So now we have the party's buffs back here, my buffs up front. If we go over to the striking dummy, so you'll see we have Surging Tempest, which actually gets prioritized to the front of the list, which is fantastic. And if we use Infuriate, again, Infuriate, or Nascent Chaos rather, shows up in front of all of the buffs from the white mage. This is fantastic, as our buffs are now separated from the buffs that we get from party members. They all get left justified. So, what if we wanted to further separate the buffs? Something that we would want to do. Let's go back into the HUD layout and see exactly how it is we could do that. We go back into the UI element. Again, Group 1, as this is the only group you can do this to. We want to display others enhancements in Group 4. Now, when you click this, it changes where your buffs from your party go. As stated, they will now be shown in Group 4. So if we scroll down to Group 4 is Status Info Others. That's this up here. Status Info Others usually displays your free company buffs, your food buff, your squadron manuals buff, and things of that nature. But with the Display Others enhancements in Group 4 selected, you will now get party buffs in this group over here. So with that, let's go ahead and increase the size of that to, let's say, 120. We don't want them too big, maybe you do. And we will also move them down so they are better in view. Let's say we'll put them next to our gauge. So now our enhancements will show up here and the parties will show up here. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like. Again, we'll start off with Surging Tempest. And now you can see we have Surging Tempest over here, left justified next to our Defiance. As we use our Inner Release, we get Inner Release, Primal Rend Ready, Inner Strength, and our friends' buffs are now showing up over here. They're completely separate from our personal buffs. Now, in our buff bar, it's all we see. It's just our buffs. What if we want to further separate our buffs? There's one more thing that we can do to the buffs, and that is we can, we can split the element into 4 groups. By doing this, what happens is we're actually creating Status Info Conditional. This is Group 2, Status Info Conditional Enhancements. We'll go ahead and have it match where we have it. And now, when we use things like our Inner Release, you can see that way over here we have Inner Release and Primal Rend Ready. Let's go back to the HUD layout and we'll actually change that to be right justified. Group 2, right justified 8 by 1. And now it puts it right next to the front there. So as we put on our own buffs, you can see that Primal Rend Ready is off to the side, and it always appears to be in the front. Realistically though, in the HUD layout, it's in its own status info conditional enhancements. Usually the conditional enhancements are different for each job, but basically it's things like Nascent Chaos Ready, or any of the Ready abilities. All of your buffs and enhancements will still show up in the regular status bar. Meanwhile, all of our party buffs are shown over here off to the side. As you can see, go back into the HUD layout, we have Primal Rend Ready and Inner Release separate, along with Surging Tempest will always show up at the front here. They will always be at the front. And you can make them bigger, you can make them smaller. I would strongly suggest going in and messing around with these settings yourself, get them to where you would want them. Personally, the settings I use are these. I have my conditional enhancements, my status enhancements, my enfeebling enhancements. I did not separate party enhancements. I like to just use the prioritize own enhancements left justified. And then all this will do is, as you can see, the party buffs show up to the right on the bar, but mine are always to the left. So I can always look at the front of my bar and just see whatever abilities I have used, what cooldowns I have active, that sort of thing. One final thing that I want to cover in this is the layout. Not this layout, the layout of each group. So if we look at, let's go to enfeeblements. Go ahead and select enfeeblements. If we look at enfeeblements, we go to group 3 and we'll go to the layout. I have mine set to left justified 20 by 1, so you'll see 20 debuffs and that will be by 1. You can change that, as I've stated before, to be 10 by 2, which is still 20 buffs, 7 by 3, which is 24, and 5 by 4, which is 20 as well. You can do the right justified 20 by 1, right justified 10 by 2, 7 by 3, 5 by 4, etc. If you do it left justified, your buffs will show up here, and again, as stated, right justified, they will show up way over here. So however you like to keep it is up to you, but it is just one of the many ways that you can change it. If you do change it to, say, 7 by 3, it makes it almost a perfect square, and then you can kind of have all your buffs and things like that in squares. If we do group 4 and also change it to 7 by 3, it makes it, again, it's like another square, and then you can have all your buffs or debuffs in squares, however you want to do it. Another thing that I didn't mention before was your party buffs and debuffs. This is not located in the HUD layout. Instead, it is under Character Configuration, Party List, and the Status Effect Icon Display Maximum. You can have it at 6, you can have it at 5, all the way up to 10. I have mine set to 8, which is just enough for me. I don't know what the priority is for it. I just know that I think yours that you have applied are prioritized, and then debuffs from enemies and bosses in encounters are prioritized to the front. So that way they're always visible. But that's about the extent of party buffs, is that what you get in the party list setting. Well, that just about covers everything for the UI element buffs and debuffs, or rather status info. I hope this video helps you with your UI customization. You may not be able to individually select buffs and make them bigger or smaller, or separate them individually one by one, but at least now you know that you can in fact separate your buffs from the party buffs. You also can make your buffs bigger than the party buffs, and you can further separate your buffs by putting your battle condition enhancement buffs in a separate area. I may decide to cover other UI elements and all they have to offer in later videos. Let me know in the comments if you learned anything, smash the like button and subscribe, and until the next one, have a safe journey.